Um, so thank you all again for joining. My name is Jenny Stars. I work for Renewable Energy Alaska Project, or REAP, a statewide nonprofit that works to accelerate renewable energy and energy efficiency across the state. I'm a program manager working on the Alaska Network for Energy Education and Employment. And as part of that work, we host this group, the Alaska Energy Training Group, for quarterly virtual meetings and any in-between conversation about energy training, technical assistance, workforce development, really in different regions and industries so that we can all work together better, improve our coordination and collaboration, and hopefully, ensure that our energy facilities um, are maintained and operating at the highest level they can. And this is a shared initiative, really open to all. We facilitate it in partnership with the Denali Commission and are always welcoming new ideas and members and topics. And so today we are going to be discussing bulk fuel training and administrative capacity building. Um, and so really I think this issue has become top of mind um, in a lot of ways because of the Denali Commission and Alaska Energy Authority's ongoing bulk fuel aggregation study. But of course, these facilities have been the backbone of rural communities for decades, and their safe and reliable operations are really, really crucial for the success of powerhouses and generators and any integrated renewable technology. Um, and, being out of compliance or not following safety standards can have really disastrous impacts on people and infrastructure um, and the environment. And so, we've got that real importance of these facilities and their operations and maintenance, contrasted with the broader statewide landscape of funding continuing to trend downward while costs are doing the exact opposite. And so it's really, creating a pinch point and even further highlighting the importance of successful training and support for local staff. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to hear from a few people working with operators and administrators across the state and discuss what types of training exist, what's working and what's not, lessons learned from the past, and new things going into the future. And our agenda for the day, for the rest of our time here together, we'll try to get out firmly at noon. And so we're going to start with a discussion with two folks from AEA about their bulk fuel training offerings and tactics. And then we'll have a presentation on utility and bulk fuel support and lessons learned at the Division of Community and Regional Affairs. And then we'll open up for a wider Q&A and discussion before saving 5 to 10 minutes at the end for group updates. We didn't quite get to those last time, so I'm really going to try to guard that final time. But don't let that deter you from asking questions. Throughout, please feel free to put questions in the chat and we'll get them answered, in real time or at the end of a speaker, or during our discussion portion at the end. And also, if you joined before I invited you to introduce yourself in the chat, please go ahead and do so. It's always great to know where people are joining from, and what part of the industry you work in. And so with that, I am going to transition us to talk to our friends from the Alaska Energy Authority, Justin Tuomi and Lucas Jury. Justin is the Alaska Energy Authority Rural Assistance Manager, and Lucas is a circuit rider with the Alaska Energy Authority. And so I'm going to be asking them some questions about the bulk fuel training offerings through AEA to kind of set a ground foundation of what's offered and then dive into some more questions about how it's working. Let me make sure I've got you guys um, spotlighted so that everyone can see you. Okay. All right. So can you guys just start off by giving us a brief overview of the types of bulk fuel training that AEA offers, including who is eligible to participate?
Yeah, so I can kind of start off and then let Luke kind of fill in where I miss. So the different kinds of training we've got a bulk fuel operator training class and then a person in charge class that's offered in Seward for basically any operators, power plant or power bulk fuel operators that operate, either the power plant or the bulk fuel facilities in these rural power plants or rural communities rather. You know, I think the eligibility requirements are like over 20 and under 2,000 people. So it pretty much covers every single rural village off the road system and some that are on. And then kind of a follow-up to that training is Luke or another circuit rider would go out and kind of follow up that training with their specific plant or facility and train on that. And I can kind of let Luke get into a little bit more of that.
Yeah, so I kind of consider myself the guy that's travels out to, I guess you'd call it, where the rubber meets the road, um, making contact with the communities. I try to involve the managers along with the operators that are actually doing the work. I think it's important to make contact with the manager as they are kind of in control of documentation and different things. Can't say that it always happens. In fact, a lot of times it's hard to, that's probably one of the biggest obstacles would be to gather all the people, let them know that I'm coming and, have a good showing. A lot of times it ends up being two or three or solely just a single operator that had gone through AvTech or certain things. So I believe the communication is pretty important right out of the gate to let everybody know. If I can, I give them as much advance notice as I can to where they can place a flyer and, you don't necessarily have to even be hired or be involved in these things if you're interested or it's something you would like to be involved in or get a job doing. I just try to invite everybody for the time that I'm there. A lot of times I'll spend the evening or it's not a long time, but yeah, I just going and making contact and trying to get everybody interested in going through the things. And a big thing I've been relying on lately is just letting everybody know there's a lot of rules and regulations, and you don't necessarily have to have it all off the top of your head, but there's plenty of resources out there to be successful, whether it's your documentation through SPCC or FRP or just solely the O&M manual. I resort back to having the information available to be successful is kind of my big talking point, along with running through the current status of the equipment and some of the maintenance and things that need to be done.
So something we've kind of noticed too in the past is a new operator comes in and they don't understand the paperwork side, or they don't understand that there is an O&M manual that they can reference. And so getting them to know what that is and where it's located and how they can reference it is a big thing to understand.
And are you, I guess, are you usually, Lucas, working with operators who have gone through one of these courses and have sort of a base level, or is it split between someone who's like a newer operator, like Justin mentioned, who maybe hasn't had the chance to attend a course, and people who have been able to attend?
Yeah, I believe a lot of people getting signed up for OutTech come from me making contact and spreading the word that these kind of things are available. I try to focus on the people that we invested in going through AvTech and following up and applying some of the resources and things that they've learned through the training that we offer in their own tank farm or environment, applying specific things and identifying what needs work specifically. I mean, tank farms are a lot alike, but they're not all the same. So if they can get the resources and training they need and then have someone there to help them apply what they've learned to their specific equipment and needs, I think it's beneficial. So truly try to follow up with the 17 to 20 people we put through bulk fuel training or PIC, and then circle back around and get the word out there, because I do identify that, a lot of times there may only be one or two operators or no real backup. So I think that's it varies. And like I said, I can go through 20 communities or operators pretty quick. Sometimes communities send 2 people at a time. It just kind of depends. So I would say it's not all based off the AvTech or the people going through our courses, but that's how we get the word out. And yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. Great context. And I know you shared a bit about what sort of topics you cover in a visit to a community, like the sort of personalized look at their system. And I was wondering, Justin, what sort of topics do the courses at AvTech cover?
So kind of generally speaking, the bulk fuel operator class, which is operated twice a year with a max of 10 students, that concentrates more on like operations and maintenance. I can kind of pull off a little more from the flyer here. It includes like the bulk fuel storage facility construction, like I said, the operations, the tank farm inspection criteria, facility maintenance, inventory control, and then safety, firefighting, how to detect spills and what to do, how to clean them up. And then the person in charge is much more like a regulatory type class. It focuses on like the Coast Guard requirements, what they're going to be coming in to look for. And that class we only offer one time a year, and it's a week-long class. But yeah, the person in charge is much more of a paperwork type heavy class. So, but there's a lot of paperwork involved in running a tank farm. So also very important. It is something that the Coast Guard looks for to see if there is like a quote unquote certified person in charge.
Mm-hmm. And do you see that it's usually different people attending both of those classes, or is it sometimes the same operator who's
oftentimes it's the same. So I generally try to make sure that the person who takes a person in charge class has either taken the bulk fuel operator class or the power plant operator class, so that they at least have somewhat of a background in those. So it's kind of a prerequisite, just because it gets so much more in the weeds. The first couple times we had the person in charge class, the instructor had kind of noted that these, they really kind of deer in the headlights when I'm telling them stuff. And I think they get a lot of that out of the way in these other classes first, that they get kind of a background in all that information, and then they can take that and build upon it in the person in charge class.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. And I'm wondering how, so you said that, someone might go to bulk fuel or power plant operator and then person in charge, and then potentially, receive a visit from Lucas. Could they go through course multiple times if they needed to, or has that ever happened? I guess I'm curious because, we hear that repetition is very important, but there's also such a high need. There are obviously like 200 communities with diesel powerhouses, something like that.
Sure. Yep. So theoretically, yeah, I mean, they can retake the class. Like we've had people that didn't end up passing like the power plant class. So then they couldn't go to the lab. And so we obviously want them to get trained. So we would allow them to retake the online version of the power plant class. If they get a passing grade, then they would go to the lab to receive that hands-on training. To my knowledge, I have not had anyone retake the bulk fuel class. Generally, there's usually a couple seats available. So if someone called up and said, hey, I'd like kind of a refresher in this, and there was open seats, I wouldn't have a problem letting them retake the class. That being said, if the class was full or it was, 3 months before the class started, I might tell them, let me put you on a wait list in case there's other students that haven't taken a class. I would like to be able to get people who haven't received training first. And then if there's open seats, by all means, I want to see the seats get filled up.
And you mentioned that power plant operator, which we're not really talking about as much in this discussion, but you mentioned that they have a an online hybrid portion, or it's a hybrid model with an online portion at the beginning and a in-person portion. Bulk fuel is all in person, is that correct? Is there any?
Correct. Yeah, so it's a much shorter class. It's just 2 weeks. We did, like during COVID, try to make that online and it wasn't very successful. There's not like a lot of theory in the bulk fuel like O&M. So, as opposed to power plant where there's a lot of like kind of foundational theory that can be conducted online, there's not as much of that for bulk fuel. So really bulk fuel is you just need to get your hands on it and get them dirty and learn that way. Is how we found best.
Sure. And what sort of resources do operators go home with after the class? Do they go home with a manual or like a cheat sheet or anything like that?
They do have the you remember what that's called, Luke? The bulk fuel rural handbook or something.
Yeah, so they have a handbook that pertains to a lot of bulk fuel, kind of call it the bulk fuel Bible, that has this great source of information. Came from 2019 and really hasn't changed much, like Justin has mentioned. He covers a wide range of stuff, just equipment you would find in a bulk fuel tank farms, from identifying torque to the size bolts. And a lot of it's just the tools and stuff that comes along with maintaining this equipment, not just generalization of, like I said, different size fasteners to the kind of gaskets and different things that should be applied, general knowledge on a lot of different working components that not necessarily just pertain to bulk fuel. So there's a lot of good information there. And I believe that he provides them with digital copies of a lot of this stuff. Jerry Blitz is a great resource and has been at it for a long time. And any questions that are brought up, I believe that AppTech has a website as well that gives them everything that he's displayed through 2 weeks of the course is provided to them if they are willing and want it. So there's a lot of resources that come through going to the actual course itself.
And I know we heard how often the AppTech courses are offered, but I'm curious, Lucas, how many on-site trainings are you generally doing in a year, and how do those get scheduled with I'm sure the volume of need, how are you deciding where to go?
Yeah, so through just, people reaching out and having specific issues or a lot of questions, I will usually provide information on my service, allowing them, is this something you'd be interested to? Me coming out and providing help, whether it's an issue, and then furthermore doing training. As far as a specific number, it gets kind of convoluted because do a lot of power plant stuff as well. I try to focus on the bulk fuel in the summertime. I've found that doing some of the bulk fuel training get kind of lost on deaf ears because ultimately they turn into snowballs and there's not much equipment to look at in the winter, along with a lot of the maintenance is getting the water out of the tanks or maintaining the stuff. So you get on the Yukon and it's 20 below, nobody's going to be outside and there's not a whole lot there. So that's one of my big pushes is you have the small window in the summertime, or as the environment allows you to do this maintenance, whether it's painting or water removal and getting at all this stuff. So I primarily take a lot of my time and focus in the summer months when the equipment is available to do the maintenance. That way, when I get there, we can actually perform these things and go through it versus, I've tried to do some in the winter and I have no objection to going there if they are asking for it, but I just found it being a lot more successful to be able, just as we kind of do with AbTech, and have the hands-on and be able to get around the equipment and do the inspections and do the maintenance. It seems to keep them more involved, more interested versus opening the O&M and, reading them a story or trying to explain it over a piece of paper. It's just the hands-on seems to always intrigue and make people more involved.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I feel like it's also, you know, such a double-edged sword, right? In Alaska, like you can get to the equipment in the summer, but that's probably when you want to be working the least. So that might make
Yeah,
participation a little bit challenging.
that's exactly it.
Yeah. Um, and after you, or I guess you mentioned at the beginning that, you know, coordination can be a real challenge, getting everybody communicating and getting everybody there when you're going to be there. Have you found anything that has worked well in the lead up to a visit, either resources you're sharing or ways you're communicating in order to get all the folks that you need to be there?
Yeah, I mean, as you stated, communication is key, I believe. That can be the hard part. There's a lot of questions that need to be asked, getting a hold of the right people. As far as like a deficiency or down thing, I feel like managers could be more involved in a lot of this and making contact with the operators through having the information through them going to school or different things. It just feels like a lot of times I would want more participation from the manager on that end, or ultimately you don't see a whole lot of managers going through the courses as well. So in my mind, if you have a strong manager, no matter who the operators are, they're there and understand and can provide the information or guidance they need to be successful in maintaining their tank farm. So I don't have a specific answer that what works good. It's more just effort in communicating what is available, and hopefully they show up when I show up, because we're investing a lot of time and money to get there. And I mean, if I make contact with one person, sure, it might be making a difference, but ultimately, if you could get the whole team there, whether it's their work schedule or not, and be able to provide this information, I just feel like it's a lot more productive. But I can honestly say that doesn't happen all the time or that often, but that's what I shoot for.
Hmm. Yeah. And I think that's, you know, something that I've heard across industries and training delivery is, yeah, it can just be really hard to get everybody on the same page. Um, okay, I'm gonna move. I have one final question, and then hopefully we can get into more stuff in the discussion too. But I was curious if you have observed any impact on circuit rider assistance requests from or after like training course attendance or after a visit from you, Lucas. Like, do you see less requests from facilities that have sent operators through courses or different types of calls or just any trends about the impact there?
Yeah, so I mean, of course, I provide them with my number and say they're welcome to call at any time. I mean, it's not as important as, say, diesel generation where the lights go out, it's direct effect, versus a tank farm where the fuel might not flow, but it's not stopping or intervening with the whole community just like that. Um, they it making uh I don't know, it's hit or miss. I mean, I have relationships with people that have no hesitation in calling for simple things versus, more technical or different things. It's more having that relationship and people feeling comfortable reaching out, or just a matter of them wanting to do better and improve upon the system that they're operating. So it varies from community to community, but I would say that, yeah, there's an impact there. And just like I try to tell them that utilize the resources available. You don't have to know anything or know the answers, but all the resources are being provided, and I'm just another resource that you could reach out to. And don't have all the answers, but I know through networking and a lot of people, we can get in the right direction and figure out what needs to happen to make it right.
Mhm. Thank you. That's, I think, helpful context. Was there anything you wanted to add, Justin? Sorry, didn't want to cut you off.
No, nope, you're good. Nope, that I think Lou covered that pretty good.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you so much for that foundation about AEA's bulk fuel trainings. I am going to, let's see, move us over to Lynn. But if anyone has any follow-up questions, feel free to put them in the chat, or we can circle back to them at the end. And let me see here. Okay, so next up, we have Lynn Kenealy, a local government specialist in the state of Alaska's Division of Community and Regional Affairs. She's been deeply involved in their RUBA, Rural Utility Business Advisor Program, targeted at water utilities, and is here to talk about some of the lessons learned from that and their new bulk fuel administrative capacity building or management capacity building program. So I'll turn it over to Lynn.
Hi there. Am I sharing the correct screen? Or are you just seeing a PowerPoint right now?
Yes, I'm seeing the.
Awesome. Okay, great. Thank you. So my name is Lynn Kenealy. I work with the Division of Community and Regional Affairs. I will try to keep this quick because I want to make sure we have time for questions. I'm just going to share some lessons we've learned from the water wastewater side and how we're working to apply that to the bulk fuel management world. So to start with the RUBA program, the Rural Utility Business Advisors Program, and I saw the list of folks here. A lot of you are already aware of this program. It was created essentially as a result of the 1996 amendment to the Safe Drinking Water Act, which required that water wastewater utilities be viable and have sufficient technical, managerial, and financial capacity, which resulted ultimately in EPA funding a state program with the goal of increasing managerial and financial capacity for rural water wastewater utilities. There's also an operations piece of that, a technical piece of that, which is carried out by DEC. The specific areas are, operational capacity, management capacity, financial capacity. We focus on those last two, and our specific supports include on-site training and assistance, remote training and assistance. We score best practices, just sort of assessing how they're doing in terms of capacity. We have a QuickBooks helpline and QuickBooks classes, and then 32-hour classes, which are both provided online and in person, and more. What have we learned? Just really briefly, we've crunched a lot of numbers on this, and basically what we find is a lot of correlations. We find a correlation between best practices scores and sustainable utilities in general. We find a correlation between communities that are engaged with our program and with DEC's program and improved best practices scores. We find a correlation between attending one of our week-long courses and an improved score not too long after attending a course. And then we find a correlation between when our staff travel to the community and provide hands-on services and improved scores. I use the word correlations because our numbers are also challenged by several areas. Specifically, and anyone who's worked with me a lot, you hear me say this a lot, we need someone on the ground to work with, and that is complicated by turnover in the communities and vacancies in the communities, and also by a lack of sufficient revenue to do the basics to even get started. So the work that we do is definitely successful, but that success kind of hinges on having someone on the ground to work with, and how quickly they turn over. And also just no matter how great your management practices are, you still do need that revenue to run your program. So that can also be a complicating factor. So how are we applying to the bulk fuel world? Well, I see Katie Conway on here. These stats all come from her. $1.5 billion needed to repair, rebuild, relocate bulk fuel tanks. There's deferred maintenance is unfunded. There's a lack of infrastructure replacement funding, a lack of training, a lack of coordination. Specifically, it's that lack of training piece on the management side, because you just heard about more the technical operations side, but more on the management side that we're seeking to address. And DCRA has sought to address this in the past. So in 2004, there was a partnership between DCRA and Denali Commission, which resulted in a bulk fuel managers training manual. And when I say managers, I mean, I'm typically talking about sort of office people. So a tribal administrator, a school superintendent, a bookkeeper, a clerk, people like that. And then in 2016 to 2019, there was another partnership, which went kind of beyond just the training stuff. We did create a two-day training workshops. And we also created a best practices scoring analysis tool for bulk fuel management capacity. The result was we did provide those trainings. They were provided both in 2019, and one of the courses is the financial management and the other is more specific to electric utilities, both for 2 days. Attendance was pretty good for those, 17 and 24 is pretty good. And then we also, as a result of having carried out that best practices assessment of several utilities, in a final report, there were several recommendations made. One was to use that assessment tool for grant funding decisions, to add more operator training, to conduct administrative training regularly, to create workable business plans, sustainable rate setting tools, and emphasis on repair and replacement accounts. So now we have a new partnership. We're thinking it'll be about 4 or 5 years, 2025 to 2029. We are seeking to update the training and then to provide that administrative training regularly. That is consisting of updating the training manual. So previously it was 2 separate 2-day trainings. So we're creating 1 3-day training. We're reusing a lot of material. So we're not just redoing everything, but we are shifting it to a 3-day training. We hope to provide it something like 4 times a year, and that will include reimbursable travel grants for participants. A lot of that stuff is really modeled off of our RUBA courses and what we've found to be successful. The courses you'll see, lesson 1, personnel and organization. Lesson 2 is operations. Again, this course is really targeted at, if you think kind of more office staff. So the operations section is not actually targeted at operators. That's really what AEA is doing. This is targeted at, again, sort of office staff, helping them understand what all goes into operations, what all is required, so that they can understand why we need this personnel, organization, and financial management. And then, of course, lesson 3, financial management and financial stability. And then an outro. And the components, this really reflects our RUBA courses, what we've found to be successful in those courses. So the pre-test, post-test is really just to show us how much the students have learned and retained. There'll be a PowerPoint, there'll be exercises and activities. That's really important to keep people engaged. We hope to have guest speakers and presenters. As you saw previously, it'll be separated into basically 4 lessons with end of lesson reviews and a course review on the last day, kind of going over everything. Hourly 10-minute breaks, a 1-hour lunch break. We like to have at least 2 instructors available at a time. We find that to be the most successful model for instructing. And then we'll have coffee, which we find to be really important. We are working closely with our partners, both in the content creation and then when we start to roll out the classes. There's a list of some of our partners. There are going to be more, of course. And our current kind of clientele or target audience, it really tends to be city and tribal administrators, clerks, bookkeepers, folks like that. As you all know, the target for this will be a little bit different than that. So we'll be leaning a lot on the AEA for, hey, who do we push this out to exactly? We do have a listserv, which sends out emails on different topics. One of those topics is related to bulk fuel. So if you know people who will want to take the course, I highly encourage them to sign up for that topic listserv so that they're getting the emails as soon as we start rolling out classes. I see that there are questions. I just need to figure out how to get to them, or there are comments at least. That's the whole presentation I had. Okay, no questions. Yeah, that was my whole presentation. I hope to have lots of time for questions, so go ahead.
Yeah, I think the only comment was from Connie saying she wants to hear this, but had to jump
Oh.
off.
And I can turn this PowerPoint into a PDF if that's helpful for anyone.
Awesome. I had one or two follow-up questions because either I missed something or I think I probably just missed it. But did you mention if the course will be in Anchorage?
Mm.
Or do you know
So
that yet?
presently the plan is in person, and we can provide it wherever it's needed. We can certainly provide it remotely. So I think right now the plan might be for actually the first course to be provided in Kotzebue in the fall. So we tend to base most of our classes are in Anchorage for the RUBA program, but then when we have sufficient regional interest, we'll hold a class in one of the regional offices like Fairbanks, Bethel, yeah, wherever it's needed.
Awesome. And I know you mentioned 2 instructors at all times. Do you have a rough idea or like a cap on how many, or a target maybe on how many people you would want per class attending?
In terms of students, for RUBA, we tend to accept in something like 25 to 30 students, and then we end up with something like 20 to 25 out of that, how many we accept. I think that we would start with that and see how it went. If we find that we have a much larger interest, we could certainly try to find ways to accommodate that.
Great. Yeah, because that's, a big group, so I was curious.
Yeah, it is. I think we've had a couple classes that went over 25, and that seems like a lot to me.
Okay, gonna make a call for any questions from our attendees about, the topic in general or specific follow-up from the presentations and discussion. I'll kick off another one. I I know that you both mentioned staff turnover, and I think that's a big issue across a lot of different industries in rural Alaska. And recognizing that training is really only one piece of the puzzle there. Retention, is a challenge to crack. Um, but I'm curious if you've seen any tactics or follow-up after training, or if you've heard of any, from maybe a manager, local staff as well as from your office. Um, have you seen anything be successful in helping retain that staff and that knowledge, or to transfer it to new staff, practices that can be put in place at training that help? That was a long question, sorry. Staff turnover, how do we prevent it?
I mean, I guess kind of generally speaking, I don't know how it would be enforced, but to sort of incentivize if an operator goes through and successfully completes training, they would get, a raise, whatever that might be. But we as the authority don't have that authority to tell them to do that. But obviously, you want to incentivize your employees to do better and take training that helps them be successful. And we might have informal conversations with them to try to nudge them that way. But again, we don't have any sort of authority to say you have to do this, or we don't really want to meddle too much into that type of thing. Can end up causing issues too. So.
I think our goal is always to get to new staff as quickly as possible so that they know there are resources. Because we're talking to, say, a city or tribal clerk who's brand new in the office and their predecessor is not there to train them, and they really don't have any guidance. So the faster that we can find out that they're there and contact them and start giving them resources and trainings, I think the better in terms of retaining that person. And I think in general, we just the more support we can provide, the better in terms of retention. We really don't have any control over pay, but I think the better your financial management, the more your utility is going to be able to pay that person. So there is maybe a trickle down effect in that sense.
Mhm. And are there any like breadcrumbs like that you've seen, staff be able to leave to like lead a new staff member back to Ruba or, the circuit riders or anyone like, yeah. Or how do you get in touch when there is new staff?
Yeah, if the entity is using the same email address for, every staff that comes in, if they can get into that email, there's a good chance there's going to be an email there from the LGS. Um, so that's probably the strongest breadcrumb we have in terms of saying, hey, we're here. But we're constantly engaged in outreach, just trying to see who's in an entity, who's there.
I think we've definitely had managers call up and after they've had operator turnover and say, hey, we just got a new operator. Can you provide some on-site training until we can get them in the next class? And also Luke leaves his business cards around. So hopefully if there is a new operator and their manager doesn't know doesn't know of our resource, that they would be able to reach out and, inquire into some training or what Luke can provide. So.
Mhm.
And then just kind of on a personal level, as far as keeping the importance of what they're doing in the forefront, which I think somewhat gets overlooked, and it could relate back to more money and certain things like that, but just kind of using words like pride and ownership and truly them understanding how important it is to keep the fuel flowing or the lights on. I pertain to it as a somewhat of a thankless job. Nobody's coming to tell you, hey, thank you for keeping the lights on for 6 months. They show up when the lights are out and call you bad names. So it's one of those things that it's not really looked upon as something, but ultimately it's really important and doesn't become important until people don't have it. So I try to talk to the operators about what they're doing and how important it is to do these things, because ultimately it can go to some serious consequences if the things aren't being done that need to be done.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a really great point. And I know that, Lynn, you mentioned that there's travel funding available for the RUBA program. I forgot to ask you guys, well, mostly Justin, I guess, with the app tech courses, but maybe Lucas too. Is there any travel support or other funding available to help support attendance?
So we do require the utility to pay for the student to get from their home into Anchorage, and if there's any like required lodging while they're in Anchorage, but AEA pays for the busing from Anchorage to Seward and then the tuition and the room and board while they're in Seward. So definitely not a cheap cost. So
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of a split model, it seems like half on
yeah.
AEA, half on the utility. And I was also curious if there were any success stories that you want to share. We've talked a lot about challenges, and that's always important to discuss and recognize. But yeah, wondering if there are any highlights of that you've seen during your time.
Well, Luke, you're more in the field than I am, so I don't know if you've got any that you can talk about. Not to put you on the spot.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's a lot of small wins as far as, certain little matters that need to be adjusted or, act upon as far as equipment operation goes. Simple as remote actuators not working, and now we have a DC fill rate pump dropped in the top of the tank, and that's just the way they decide to conduct business because it's expensive, or they just don't have the resources or where to look to get the component replaced and go back to the way the equipment was designed operationally. There's nothing specific that stands out. For me, it's gaining a relationship with these communities and them willing to reach out and get the information they need to move forward and do what needs to be done to run a successful operation. I mean, obviously there's a bigger picture in a lot of it, but gaining the relationship and having them reach out for help is probably some of my biggest successes. Not out there rebuilding tank farms. I also think through the agency, just identifying through inventory and assessment, these areas that are truly struggling and being able to upgrade this equipment and just being a part of that is a success in itself, personally.
Yeah, like how you mentioned earlier that, success isn't always visible. It's the failure that really gets people's attention.
Yeah.
Was there anything you wanted to add, Lynn? Sorry, I got you when you were drinking water.
Okay. No, we've definitely had a lot of success stories over the years in terms of watching just a really great administrator or a really great clerk or bookkeeper come in who took really well to the training and helped update all of their accounting systems, for instance, and really got them caught up. Yeah, we definitely can show that there is a lot of success out there, but it's really hard when these utilities don't have any support. And it's such a small community, it's unlikely that there's going to be local support. So we're definitely here for a reason.
Mhm. Yeah. All right, gonna put out another call. Any group members have any questions for our presenters? We
Yeah,
got
this
one.
is Chandler
Yeah.
at the UF Bristol Bay campus. I just put this in the chat, but I was wondering how the deferred maintenance and shortage of capital funding that you've spoken to, how does that affect the curriculum that you deliver? It seems like it would make it extra challenging to deliver workforce training for people that are having to work with older facilities.
Yeah, I definitely use that as a reason for, sound financial management is really vital because these resources aren't going to be found externally. So we give a lot of sort of stories and really back up the work that we're doing by trying to help people understand exactly those factors, that those factors are part of the larger picture of why this is important.
And I think as far as like an AvTech curriculum, I don't think it'd be possible to figure out the status of, the 10 different tank farms that the operators are from, and then kind of tailor it to each one of them. Jerry's kind of going over like the general O&M practices of how to operate it, and then Luke's going to go in there and train maybe specifically to their tank farm. And Luke also conducts an assessment and trains off of where kind of some of those deficiencies are. So hopefully then they gain that relationship like he was saying, and then they're able to see what parts or materials they need, and whether he goes out there again to help them replace, or they're able to replace themselves, or whatever the case may be, but try to get it back up to where it was.
And one quick follow-up question maybe to Luke is, when you're going out to these sites, do you encounter like unsafe conditions for the people operating the fuel tank farms, and how do you make sure that students are safe while working on some of the older sites?
Absolutely. I mean, that's kind of a big thing that I've encountered through all the places that I've been. Not every place, but you're dealing with working at heights essentially to get up on top of these tanks. And there's a lot of situations where, you need to manually strap the tanks, or that's how you're identifying water through the tanks. And the system is just not set up to safely do that. And I do believe there's a lot that is neglected because of that. And I don't recommend it. I tell them that I wouldn't go up on that dome top tank, and access is not safe. And without having a good tie off point, it's just something that's not recommended. So these are all things that you're constantly identifying, working around. And of course, person's personal safety and health is a big conversation that I have through my training, and try to identify those things. And hey, you got this ladder, it should be tied off, or this is just not safe, and we should work towards making this more accessible to be able to do the things that are recommended. So it's definitely out there in a lot of places, especially as you said, the older stuff, the more it becomes aged or had been built. It's it's a definite it's a definite thing out there. I just try not to put anybody in harm's way as I go through the training. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. Case by case, evaluating the situation as you get there.
It is definitely there.
Yeah, thanks for those insightful questions, Chandler. Last call. I think we have time for one more question if anyone has one. I'll jump in with one. Are you guys, and maybe I missed this in your presentation too, are you guys planning to use some of the like the best practices scorecard for your management training, Lynn, or any other Ruba tools?
I would say that the course that we're piecing together definitely relies a lot on what we've learned through the Ruba program, which definitely includes those best practices elements of financial management, budgeting, all that kind of stuff. We're not carrying forward with the bulk fuel best practices tool right now, but we still have it. So if anyone ever wants to look at that or is interested in bringing it back up for any reason, we're happy to share it.
Helpful, thank you. Okay, well, thank you so much for all of that knowledge. I know Lynn shared the listserv link in the chat. I'll also make sure to save it and share it out with folks afterwards. And I think we'll also be able to share some materials from each program in email follow-up. I wanted to leave a little bit of time for any participant updates from the group. Anything happening in your work or part of the Alaska energy world that you want to flag to the rest of the group?
Hey all, this is Griffin with the Alaska Municipal League. I just wanted to give a quick shout. I know we have a few other AML folks too on the line. But we, for the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program, which I think we've shared a little bit about in the past, which is still funded, even though it has climate, it's a climate related EPA funding, but I think partway through it, and with our focus on affordability and things like that, we seem to be in a good spot. I will say that an update there in the workforce space is that we did complete a workforce planning analysis draft with our contractor Kinetic West. I know a number of folks on the call and otherwise have contributed with interviews and such. If anyone is interested, I forwarded it to some folks. We have a pretty fast turnaround to try to get feedback on that analysis, but if anyone is at all interested, feel free to ping me and I can forward the draft. We'll also have the final version soon for folks to review. But yeah, looking for feedback in particular on the recommendations. And if you aren't able to give feedback now, or you see it later and you're like, oh, I want to add this context, this is a document that eventually is ending up in our final plan for CPRG, which is due later this year to DEC and EPA. And that is a place where we can definitely add materials. So if you don't get a chance now to provide any feedback, or later you look and you say, hey, this sort of recommendation is missing, please feel free to let us know. But yeah, I'll drop my email and folks can send an email if they haven't received that and are interested.
Awesome. Thank you, Griffin. Looking forward to that.
And yeah, and again, we're looking for feedback by Thursday, close business. So a little bit fast, but thanks.
And my newest, well, maybe not newest, almost newest colleague at REAP, Steve. Go ahead.
Oh, thanks, Jenny. Hi, everybody. I'm Steve Cleary, newly hired here at REAP to be the Community Programs Director, but I just want to mention, and I'll drop in the chat as well, the Energy Technology Initiative Partnership Program is now open for applications, and we are trying to encourage communities to apply for that technical assistance program. You can contact us for more information, and yeah, there's a flyer there, and please email us, but we would be excited to tell you more about that opportunity. Thanks very much.
Yeah, there's a lot of different types of projects that can be eligible for ETIP, including workforce related ones. So it's a great opportunity. Any other updates? Okay, well, the final update is that the next meeting for this group is going to be September 9th. So we won't be meeting over the summer. That's the perk of a quarterly schedule. Topic TBA. So feel free to get in touch if you have any suggestions. We have a couple items that we're interested in discussing, but always open to suggestions. And with that, I will follow up in the next week or so with an email with a recording and some notes, and I'll make sure that the relevant information that was shared in the chat also goes out. So thank you all. Hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jenny. Thanks, everybody.
See you later.